Hi, uh, my name is Cecil Walker,
And I'm Adam Frower.
and this is Possibilities. Today we're going to figure out a way to answer the very big question of how do you keep going when it feels like things are way too hard? And a part of me just wants to say, Adam, what's the answer?
A part of me wants to say, Cecil, what's the answer?
What I really think about, what's interesting about this topic to me is somehow it comes up a lot when I'm doing therapy with clients. I find myself asking them, how did you do that thing? When that felt like such a difficult moment, or all the things were saying you should have stopped, or you should have felt like the obstacles were too great. I find myself asking them very often, how did you do that? How did you keep going? How did you make it to the next step or the next day or whatever? And I think the most common answer seems to be, I don't know. But I think they follow that up with some kind of, it felt like I had to, or it felt like, I had no choice. Like, every part of me knew that I just had to keep moving, or that this wasn't the place I was supposed to stay stuck in. There was something else I was supposed to get to, or that, just for some reason, just the pieces of it all just came together and I just kept going. So I guess here's your way out, just flat out giving us the answer. How do you interpret that? What do people mean by I had to keep going, so I did, or it just happened when people give that sort of an answer?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the original question and then I'm going to answer your question. But the original question was like, how do you keep going when it seems too hard? And I think part of the answer lies in the way that question was constructed, which I don't think that we necessarily did on purpose, but that word seems is embedded in there, right? So if it seems too hard, that also implies it isn't actually too hard. It just appears too hard. And I think that holds the key a bit, is it's really a shift in our perspective. And then I'll bring it back to where you were, which is this idea of, how do you keep going a bit? How do you hold on to it a bit? And you use this phrase of like, well, every part of me just felt like I had to. And I think that contributes to that shift in perspective, is that I moved from thinking about like, what is it going to take to accomplish this thing, or how do I keep going, to there's this driving force that's in me. It just feels like I just need to follow through. I just need to put one step in front of the other, and it'll work out in some way. And so I think part of it is where my attention is focused. I can either be focused kind of on the arduous journey, or I can be focused on what it feels like in me. Why am I doing this? What's the driving force behind this? And I think when we focus on why am I doing this, or what does it take just to put that next step in place, one step seems much more doable than completing the entire journey. And if I just string together a bunch of one steps, then somehow I've completed the whole journey. And so I think in both of those ways of looking at it, it is a bit of shifting my perspective. What am I looking at? Or I remember it just seems too hard, but that also seems to imply there's something about me that's capable of doing this.
Yeah.
So kind of reevaluating and saying, well, what is it about me that might actually be able to accomplish this thing? So in all of those angles, it's kind of like you shift your perspective to somewhere that's a more doable thing.
I think that shift in perspective really depicts how a certain kind of certainty seems to make the difference. Because I struggle to find the words to describe the how in the middle. But if I think back over all of the toughest times in my life, or even the times that I've heard from clients, it seems like there was this conviction that the end point was going to come. I'm
Yeah.
going to get to that place. This is going to happen. I'm going to make it to where I'm trying to go. I'm going to achieve what I'm trying to achieve. Maybe I don't know how. Maybe I don't even feel like I have the energy to. Maybe I feel like I'll be destroyed by this, whatever the situation is, any day now. But if you have the certainty that you'll get there, it somehow seems to work its way out. And I guess you could say that's, you'd be more certain about the ways that are possible, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's that certainty unlocks something. It's that I have to get there, so I'm going to do whatever is possible to get there. And then I think we start to tap into what you're talking about is, well, what is it within me that makes this possible? What options do I have? What resources do I have? If I try every avenue that could possibly present itself, which one of these ways is going to potentially get me there?
Yeah, and it's interesting because as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about two different scenarios, and oftentimes in scenario one, oftentimes it's that like I have to endure a certain thing, right? I think I have 3 kids, and I think lots of them would say like I have to endure 7th grade, and just simply by nature of time, if all they do is just show up, the end will come.
Right.
And so you can look at the beginning and you can be like, man, it seems so long and it seems so hard and I have so much to learn and if you focus on all of the distance you've got to go, it can be overwhelming. But if you focus on like that, well, inevitably that day is going to come. I just have to wake up enough times and the last day of school is going to be here.
Yeah.
And so the shift, it doesn't really do us much good to say like, well, how am I going to make it there? Because inevitably I'm going to make it there whether I want to or not. So the question of how isn't so much how do I get to the end, but it's what kind of person do I want to be, or what kinds of things do I want to accomplish along the way? How do I want to show up along the way to this thing that's inevitable? So I think that's scenario one is when we pull apart the language of how do you do this when it seems too hard, is part of it is inevitable. So then you have a decision of like, well, what kind of person do I want to be when I'm showing up? The second kind of how is not something that's necessarily inevitable, right? Like I want to become a pilot. I don't want to become a pilot, but if I want to become a pilot, it's not inevitable that I'm going to become a pilot. I have to do certain things. I have to pass certain tests. I have to show proficiency in certain things. But again, it's not so much like how am I going to become a pilot, but it's how do I want to show up as I become a pilot? I'm going to take this first course. What kind of student do I need to be in order to complete course number 1? I need to get lots of practice hours. How can I find a coach or a trainer who's going to teach me the best way that's consistent with me? So now it's not so much like I need to accomplish this big goal, but I need to find somebody who's compatible with me. I need to understand what my learning style is. And so I think a lot of this is a self-evaluation of what do I need in order to be successful, to become that thing that I want.
Yeah.
And as we put those pieces in place, like one at a time, if I take the right course, if I practice just enough, if I find the right instructor, if I find people who support me, if I need financial assistance, if I work at a job for a certain amount of time to get the money that I need, ultimately those pieces start to fall into place. And so again, I think it's like when it seems so overwhelming, perhaps the answer is let's break this down into achievable things that are going to help me show up the way I want to show up.
Yeah. What both of those scenarios and how you describe them kind of show me is that at no point are you responsible for the whole picture. Because the task of overcoming this thing or whatever it is at hand, if we're going with the school example of getting that degree, or maybe you're dealing with an illness, or maybe it's a family conflict or something like that, or you got to get through 7th grade. No one momentary version of you is going to do that whole thing. It's very unlikely that that's possible. I mean, even something as simple as I want to get in shape, like you right now can't do the whole thing, but you every day could do its own small part of that. You from moment to moment, from week to week, just even from thought to thought, can kind of chip away at it as you need to. And when you think of it that way, it becomes, well, one, much more doable, but it also means your responsibility at any given moment is tiny. It's, or much smaller at least. It kind of makes me think of, I've seen so many like refugees in for therapy, and many of them, their stories sound something like, something awful, disastrous, terrible, life-threatening happened in my country of origin. Maybe civil war broke out. Maybe some, there were bombs. There was military. They destroyed my home. They threatened my family. I was just a bystander. Maybe something shook up the way that I was living my life, and now I suddenly knew I had to restart. I had to build life again. Now missing people, or now even injured myself. Now different than I was before, and anyone in that position could be riddled with thoughts of, how am I gonna just build a whole life for myself again, most likely in a different place, maybe a different country, in a different culture, without the resources, without even all the family that I had before. And when I think of, you traveled all the way from wherever you're from, some part of Africa, some part of the Middle East, Central America, to the US, and are now working some different job that probably wasn't what you were trained to or used to doing, and you're having to learn a language you had no reason to learn ever before, in a totally different culture with people and surroundings that are totally different. That whole thing sounds impossible, especially as you're dealing with all the mental health effects of having experienced the trauma that you went through. But what they'll say is that they didn't see the whole thing, at the beginning. It was after the attack, after the moment of violence that disrupted my whole life, I knew I just needed to leave. I had to get out of there. So that was maybe step one, or one of the first steps. I had to get somewhere safe. Then I had to regroup and get my family, my relationships together. Then we had to think about, what are our options for where we go next? Maybe there's a nearby country like Turkey or something that's a bit safer. A refugee camp that we could go to and start to apply for this process of becoming a refugee. Or maybe we just move by foot to wherever we think could be the safest place. A lot of people who are displaced in Africa, especially Western Africa, will actually go over to South America. They'll somehow get over to Brazil, and go by foot, by car when they can, along the way up as far north as they can make it, trying to find safety along the way. And generally, you can find little pockets of safety as you get further up. Maybe some stop in Mexico, but oftentimes they make their way all the way to the US, some even to Canada. And the idea is that every step along the way is just, I'm just trying to do a little bit better than we were before. We made it to South America. I could find some labor job, or I could work on a farm or something, and that gives us enough money to make it to a slightly safer area, or a slightly more industrialized area. I could gather my family, and we just try to rest up enough that we could keep walking further along enough that we make it somewhere that's not too ravaged by gangs, or ravaged by natural disaster or something. They never said, today I'm going to conquer the problem of restarting my life. They said, today I'm going to do what I need to do to make it till tomorrow. I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure my family's all right for today. And when you add that up over time, it sounds impossible. A week of that sounds impossible to me, but years of that sounds like they should make a movie about your life. And that's obviously a very epic example, but I think that could apply to anything. If you want to turn your health around, if you want to turn a relationship around, if you want to start a new career, if you want to just fix your mental health, just fix your well-being, any of those things, I think, could follow the same kind of pattern, where it's just, that whole thing sounds hard, but if I string together enough moments of, I can do this little thing, then it becomes the whole big impossible thing.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful, actually. A couple of things that you said stood out to me, and one of those things was, and you didn't say it quite like this, but in some sense it was, cherish the momentary success, right? Like, if you get to the end of today and you found a place that was slightly safer than yesterday, or if you got to the end of today and you had your family closer together than you did the day before, or and just pausing to take note of that and to say, okay, I made a small incremental difference, and getting your family to closer together, or getting all of the family members together, that that would seem significant in that moment. And so just kind of relishing that significance, finding somewhere where you feel a bit safer, that would feel monumental in the moment. And so I think part of what we're talking about is, yeah, don't take the whole thing at the same time, take one day at a time, but also cherish each day for what it is. Like,
Yeah.
take note, this was a success today.
Yeah.
This got us this not even this got us closer to where we want to be, but we survived today, and that was good enough. That's
Yeah.
worth celebrating. I think that's one thing, but I think the other thing is the consistency, right? You can't let up for a long period of time, or else you'll find yourself like, we're not in as safe a place as we could be, or whatever. And so there was consistency. They found their way from Africa to South America, and then slowly kept moving up and looking for more safety, more safety, more safety. And I think there's a lesson in there for us of just like consistently looking for what's the next step, where's the next haven of safety, who's the next family member that we need to make sure to connect with. And I think sometimes when people say, it just seems too hard to keep going, or I just don't think I can accomplish that thing, it's the drain of the everyday. People are like, we have all these terms like, I'm fatigued, or I'm burned out, or I'm whatever. And I think what you're talking about, there's a lesson in there is consistent small progress adds up. I think sometimes when we're burned out, we feel like we need to conquer lots of things all at the same time, or take on the biggest hill. But one step up the hill is sufficient, and those small things add up to big things. And so those were two kind of things I heard in what you were saying that I think are really valuable lessons.
Yeah. The last thing that I would kind of string underneath all of that too is, when something feels important, like important enough to the stance of this has to happen, you make a way. And I guess that ties back to one of the first points that we were saying is, there's certainty at the end of this. It'll happen. And I think you can find certainty in finding what's meaningful to you. And it's not just that certain acts or things that you're trying to do, certain decisions that you're making are important or not important. I think you have to be able to connect importance to them. I've seen you do all the things you do in the morning. You wake up at like 5 a.m. before the sun is up, and you do a million things before it's even 10 o'clock. And that feels like, to me, like a long list of very difficult things that I would feel finished for the day by the time I got through them. But then you have the actual rest of your day that you actually have to work through. And I assume you do it because there's some meaningful reasons behind that. You're spending time with your children. You're prepping them for their day. You're helping them get the best start that they can have. You're helping them use those moments in the beginning of the morning in the best way possible, to build them up and to make them feel prepared and ready. And I think if it was disconnected from something meaningful, if this was just like a part-time job you had to work from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., it wouldn't feel like this is something I could do every day. This is something that I could see myself squeezing into the whole entirety of my day. And so I even if it is a part-time job, if you're able to connect meaning to it, I feel like that's what makes things happen. That's what makes something that's really, really hard, something that's really tiring or draining, feel like, well, I have to do this thing because it's important.
Yeah, I think that is really valuable, and I think another component that makes things meaningful is when I'm not in it on my own, right? I think again, I go back to that account of the refugees, and a big part of that is like pulling the people, like maintaining my family relationships together. I think the people from other cultures and refugees that I've worked with, I think about like they want to hold on to parts of their culture, right? It's not just that they're fleeing their land, but they're bringing that with them. I think about in anything that I have accomplished that I feel really proud of, or that I feel like it was worthwhile, there were supportive people along the way. whether that was my family members who were kind of like every step of the way sacrificing as well for that to be able for me to be able to accomplish that, or whether that was a close group of friends who were trying to accomplish the same things that I was trying to accomplish. So now we're helping each other and we're supporting each other. We're giving each other tips. We're saying, hey, try this. This will make your journey a bit easier as well. And so I think part of what sometimes makes things seem so big and overwhelming and like unaccomplishable is when I'm in it by myself. I'm the only one exerting energy and force toward accomplishing this thing. Well, then, yeah, if I get tired, the progress stalls or the rock starts rolling back down on me. But if there are other people who are like walking alongside of me, who are cheering me on, or who can just hold it for a second while I take a quick break, or whatever it is, I think that also keeps the momentum building. And I think sometimes we don't think about who can I reach out to in this moment. And I think in the work that we do, sometimes we're the person people reach out and say, I'm drowning here. And they reach out to us as professionals and they say, can you help me? And simply by reaching out to another person, the load feels a bit lighter. So I think that's the other piece, and I think it is connected to meaning, right? Sometimes I'm doing these things for those other people, and sometimes that means they're helping me do it. And so I think surrounding yourself with people who can help oftentimes makes something that seems insurmountable all of a sudden doable.
I totally agree with that. I would think that some of the most miraculous things that any human being has accomplished has been for someone or with someone or because of someone. And that could literally be like, I'm doing this thing to help this person. I'm doing this thing to make this person proud. I'm doing this thing in memory of someone. I'm doing this thing because I know that this person would think that's the right thing to do. I'm doing this thing in camaraderie with or in community with these people. I think that's what creates some of the most admirable and amazing things that any of us could ever see ourselves doing. I think that's why there's all this interactive ways of accomplishing fitness goals. You have a workout buddy, or you share your fitness information through your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or anything like that. It's the withness that seems to make things feel more meaningful, to feel more like I can do this. I think there's a lot of strength and truth to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started talking about this, I hadn't thought about this, but as you were talking, it brought it back to my memory. I was listening to this story about this woman, and I don't know why anyone would do this. It sounds horrible to me. But she was I don't remember exactly what the sport is called, but it's in essence where you run really long distances, like hundreds of miles over many days. But you purposely are doing it by yourself. The whole point is you have to overcome this super arduous journey alone. And it takes so long that you wear this geo tracker that people can follow you along in case something happens or you get lost or whatever. Again, it sounds absolutely horrible. But there was a woman who was going to run this race, and she was going to try to beat the record of this really long distance by yourself. And along the way, there are these caches, right, where you can stop and you can get food, and they have water pumps so you can fill back up your water, but no one is allowed to help you in any way. So even if you get to one of these cache boxes and somebody else is there, they can't hand you food or they can't pump the water for you. This is something you do absolutely alone. And so this woman was going to run this race and try to get the world record. And her partner was a photographer. And so her partner decided that she was going to stop at random pit stops and take pictures of her partner as she's running past. And so they were going to, in essence, document this world record run. And part of the run, you run down the slope of the Grand Canyon, across the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and then back up the Grand Canyon. And that's not even the whole race, that's just a part of it. So she starts this race, and periodically, as she's running, she would see her partner like perched in a tree or whatever, or like down in a bush, and like just secretly taking pictures of her. And this whole race is being documented on Instagram, that they would like post random pictures of her like making progress along this race. Well, the organizer of the race started posting on these pictures and said, "You're violating a rule." And they had no idea what rule she was violating, and so she just kept going. And one time they stopped, or she stopped at one of these caches, and her partner was there and like took pictures of her pumping the water, like to prove like I did not help her, like she's doing all of this on her own. And she gets to the end of the race and she won by day. I think she beat the record by like a day and a half.
Wow.
Which was like a huge accomplishment. And the organizer of the race disqualified her and said, "It doesn't count." And she said, "Why? Why doesn't it count?" And the organizer said, "Because the moral support of seeing your partner periodically would enhance your performance. You would get a boost of energy, you would be happy, you would want to, prove to her that you're doing everything that you were saying that you were going to do." And because she was along the way, even though she didn't touch you, you didn't even talk to her, just seeing her was moral support. And that violates the rule. And I think that at first when I heard that, I was like, that is not fair. She didn't help at all. She didn't touch her. She didn't talk to her. But as I thought about it more, I thought about my own partner, right? If I saw my partner on a really arduous journey, that would give like a boost, like a moral boost to be like, okay, I can do this, or I want to show her that this is, worthwhile to me. And that would give a boost. And I think if we can get energy simply by seeing somebody important to us, that on days when it seems really hard, just having those people close to us really would be a boost to be like, as much as I don't want to run this thing anymore, I'm going to keep running because they're depending on me to keep running. If I don't run to the next thing, she's not going to have anything to take pictures of. And so I think that we underestimate sometimes the power that we receive just from like a glance or a smile or an encouraging look, whatever it is. And so I think that's one thing that came back to me is like, if we're trying to do something that seems really difficult, find people who are just going to, and then we're not even held to the same rules if they can't help us. Like find people to like praise and shout and scream and clap and whatever it takes, and that in and of itself will push you through.
Yeah, I think that is brilliant. That shows how much power there is in connection and relationships, and it really brings home this idea of how people can be a resource for you rather than an obstacle as you're trying to accomplish whatever the thing is that you're trying to see yourself accomplish. I realize we've been going this whole time, and I didn't even ask you any other questions along the way, but we still got to.
That's good. I got out of your questions. They're always really hard.
I'll get you hard for the next one. Don't worry. But yeah, it feels like we still were able to have a really thorough conversation somehow about what to me seemed like an impossible question at the beginning of this.
Yeah, and I think that in and of itself, right? I was thinking about that same thing too, of like we encountered this, and for those of you who don't know, we don't really talk beforehand about like how's this going to play out, or what are we going to say, or and so when you sat down, I was dreading. I was like, if he asks me, what's the answer to this? I was like, I don't know the answer to this. But I think I think there's a message in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like we simply like take one moment at a time. We build what is the right thing in that moment. And I think over time something really beautiful just emerges. And I think that's so consistent with the work that we do as solution based principles, right? It's all of what we need is in there. Mm-hmm. We just have to trust that it'll come out in the right moment. And as you create an environment where it fosters the coming out of our greatest strengths, it does. It comes out, and then we can do all kinds of things we didn't think we could do.
Yeah, it really starts to show how much of a difference belief can make. But when you sit down and say, I want to be happy, I want to be confident, I want to have peace. I want to get back to my old self. And when you look at that from an angle of, I'm going to get there, I just got to somehow figure out what's the step right now? What do I do in this moment? And then what does the next moment look like? And the next moment. And before you realize it, it's, oh, I could accumulate all this together and say, I have happiness I didn't have before.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully that conversation around how do you do something that just seems too hard to do? How do you keep going when things seem too hard to keep going? Hopefully that was useful. If you know somebody who could benefit from hearing about this, please share this with them. If you have additional thoughts, if you have overcome something that seemed really insurmountable and you did that some way that we didn't really touch on, leave us a comment. Let us know how you accomplished something really difficult. We want to learn from you just as much as we hope that you're learning from us. So until next time, we really appreciate you being here, and we'll catch you next time.